Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Pup. We are back with another day of leaks. Sorry I missed you guys yesterday, but there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts in here, and a lot of stuff that we're still figuring out, and it's probably going to get a lot slower from here on out. But here, we're going to start with X and Y leaks. We also have some stuff from ORAS, so stay tuned for what all we see in the next upcoming days as well. But first of all, you saw the thumbnail. We see a couple new beta Pokemon. We do have a beta Florges, which is really cool. Looks like kind of a split evolution line with, maybe like female and male Florges kind of looking thing, which is pretty cool. I love this design. I think it's great. I think it, is nice to stick away from the flower Pokemon and kind of go more into that mystical fairy sort of Pokemon for our first ever fairy type, but still really cool design. But there are a couple other beta Pokemon that we saw in X and Y as well, like this fire-eating bird Pokemon. That's really cool. I don't have translated images of it, but basically two-stage Pokemon. It's unknown kind of what the type is, but it's a fire-eating bird, and it just looks pretty cool. It might overlap with like the Mandibuzz Volibee sort of line, so I could see why they would want to scrap it. But super cool Pokemon that I'd love to see back in the games. The third Pokemon is this chameleon sort of guy, which is really cool. I love the design on this dude. Kind of like that spirally sort of thing, and I don't know exactly what it would go with. I don't know why they would want to scrap this Pokemon, but it is super cool, and I wish we had it in the games. Next beta Pokemon, there are actually a couple more than I talked about at first, but we have basically what is Flamigo. So we definitely took this design from the scrap Pokemon in Gen 6 and brought it out because this is, basically exactly what we see with Flamigo, except for the one that we have in game is a little bit less feminine. I mean, this guy looks like he's in high heels sort of thing, but it's basically Flamigo. We also have another one which we have reused the assets or the design for, which is going to be this Golisopod looking guy, and you can obviously see like the Wimpod little guy, and you can see why their designs are very similar. Obviously it's a little bit different where this one's more of like a scarab being on all fours, but Golisopod and Wimpod, they share a lot of designs with these, so I'm pretty sure that's why they were out in Sun and Moon. There's also this little shark guy kind of looks like what we see when we're surfing in Pokemon, like right under us in these games. There's an image out there somewhere. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to find that and pull it up, but it looks like that's what we surf on, so it could have been something like that. It also kind of looks to me like it could be like a Sharpedo like pre-evolution sort of thing, but that is a little bit of a stretch, but I don't hate that idea. It's a pretty cool looking Pokemon, and I don't understand why we don't see it in the games now. But the kicker for this is this peanut Pokemon. Basically looks like a convergent species with a Breloom, kind of like Wugtrio for Dugtrio. This Pokemon is super cool. There's also a pre-evolution to it that looks less like a Shroomish, but I wanted to, show why I think it's like a Breloom sort of Pokemon. But this guy is insanely cute. There's a ton of fan art out for him already, ton of stuff like that. But I mean, man, this is a super cool design, and we haven't seen anything like it, but I think a peanut Pokemon like this could be super cool. In these leaks, we also got a bunch of sheets in X and Y, basically talking about their storyboards, that sort of stuff. And one that I really wanted to highlight here is that we have a virus Pokemon kind of drawn up here that you can see. It's obviously not translated, but what I've seen from some translations is this was basically related to the Ultimate Machine. Basically this Pokemon or virus was intended to be kind of that destructive force in the beginning and kind of got reworked at the end, but it reminds me of like Hoopa looking at it with like all the holes on it, or kind of that Spider-Man villain from the latest movies where he's like white with a bunch of dots, that guy. But pretty interesting. They also had a lot of different story stuff with AZ, where Lysander was never really in the early builds. There's a lot of stuff about they really accurately described what was going to go on before they even started any sort of process, and Lysander is nowhere to be found in there. It's basically just AZ, who was going to be Team Flare's leader and was going to be the boss of this Pokemon game, and basically his idea is that he wanted to use the weapon to literally like take out every single person and replace them with his descendants. So absolutely insane. I do understand why that was changed a little bit, because that is a little harsh. But I would love to see more Ultimate Machine stuff. There's a lot of concept art in here as well for it, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna show all of that just because I don't want to get so much stuff from Nintendo, because they are running around. I'm a little bit scared. But another important thing I thought from Pokemon X and Y was we have a type chart from the betas of these games, and this is pretty interesting. Basically, Poison was not super effective against Fairy in the start. It was both Fire and Ice, I think, were both super effective against Fairy, which would have been pretty cool. And then Fairy was super effective against Bug. So interesting thing, Ice would have resisted Fairy, which would have been a huge buff to Ice types. But I like this. I like where we have it with Poison, being a little bit more useful for this niche. But I think this type chart would have changed a ton of things and would have been super cool to see. So maybe we'll see some type changes in the future with the type chart. Maybe kind of going back to this sort of thing with potentially Ice changes with the Fairy typing. Obviously, there's a lot more about Pokemon X and Y, but you guys can all find this stuff. I found this mostly through 4chan. There's also a ton of people on Twitter that are leaking this. Doggy is one that I've been following a bunch and shows a lot of this stuff. Maybe is posting it as well. But next up, we move to Pokemon X and Y, where they did have a ton of crazy concept art that I'm super excited to show you guys. There's tons of high resolution imagery of stuff that artists designed for basically how these games are going to look. They're not like sketches of everything. They are fully fleshed out, like 1080p sort of crazy things. But I'll show you one right here. This is Archie kind of in like the aqua layer, and you can just see how much attention to detail they put in this. The artists at Game Freak did a crazy amount of work with this, and the inspiration, man, they were excited about this game, and I'm excited about it too, even though I was 10 years in the past. But these are super cool, and I wish we got to see more of this sort of stuff. I wish they put out these arts so we could see them all, but there's probably hundreds of arts that are just like this. I'll show a couple more here, where there's one with Team Aqua and Team Magma submarines that are Sharpedo and Camerupt. I think that is super cool, but stuff like this is just why I love the game. It shows that the developers care so much, and maybe it's not so much Game Freak doesn't care about the games, but it's more of maybe the Pokemon Company not letting them show everything, or just not everything making it to the surface. But we know, looking at all this stuff deep down, Pokemon Company and Game Freak, I mean, there's a lot of care going on in there. We also have a couple character sheets for a Team Aqua admin here, which is pretty cool, just showing their design concept, showing kind of their tendencies too. You can see it so much through the art forms, even just the sketches. You can see like the character of these Pokemon people coming through, and it's super cool to see. But if you guys are interested in seeing a lot more of this, I'll go over it as the days go by, but there's a lot of new stuff coming out. But you can easily find this if you go on Twitter, if you go on literally anywhere and look up these leaks. There are hundreds of PDFs and Photoshop files and images of all of this super cool stuff, so go check it out for yourselves. But the last thing that I want to talk about is something else that we found in the ORAS files. We found a lot more beta Pokemon, which is kind of funny that they put it in with ORAS. Maybe it's the leaker just not knowing which Gen 3 stuff was actually Gen 3 and which Gen 3 stuff was ORAS, blah blah blah. Who knows, maybe they used this kind of, they went back to all these beta Pokemon, all these concept arts and everything when developing new games, when developing, megas, that sort of stuff. But we see, I'll show a couple of, not really important ones. We've got Jirachi here. You can see kind of it's a work in progress sprite. And from what it seems like on some of these, not this one specifically, but they were like kind of animating these sprites even back in Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, which is pretty cool. But it seems a little bit different than what we see today. It's pretty cool though. And then we also have a Medicham here, which is a lot different, but still, very similar design. It's not like, if you guys watched my other videos, like Wingull changed from basically like a Volbeat or a Volbeat or Illumise looking bug to an actual bird. It's nothing as crazy as that, but it's still pretty cool to see their design process. But the kicker here is that we had this dog concept that we saw in the Gen 3 files, and we never saw any sprites for it. But here we do see some sprites for it and kind of a baby form, while also seeing, maybe an early Metang and color swaps for the palette of Kyogre, Metagross, and one of the Lotties. I think this is super cool. You see in the top left is going to be like the baby dog, and then the bottom right is going to be like, you know, the actual dog. These Pokemon, I mean, it looks tiny just from the sprites, but super cool, and you can see exactly why they had that dog concept, because it looks awesome, man. And also looking at these, like, they kind of look like a Zygarde dog form sort of thing, which I could definitely see them taking some inspiration from that, especially, you know, looking at it with the color scheme behind it. Definitely reminds me of that sort of thing. But it's really cool to know that all of these concepts weren't lost, so there's potentially stuff for, you know, the giant cactus Pokemon that we saw, if there's, you know, if they didn't just make that into Cacnea and Cacturne. There's also a bunch of other really cool concept arts, like the big unknown one, that there still might be sprites out there somewhere for these if they ever made it to that final design stage. But that's going to be about it for me, covering a lot of stuff, and there's still a lot more coming out. There's a lot more ORAS stuff. There's a lot of even Pokemon's Legends Arceus stuff that came out last night, so be on the lookout for some stuff covering that, maybe later today, maybe early tomorrow. But that's going to be about it. See you guys in the next one. Peace out.